He's mad, too.
But I don't want to go among mad people.
Oh, you can't help that. Most everyone's mad here.
What can you say about the UN and cyberviolence? The United Nations had a meeting at which the usual self-promoting con artist and an alleged domestic abuser and online harasser were again given a floor to talk about online abuse from a completely one-sided point of view. As trolling goes, that's pretty much the ultimate, isn't it? That's like Godfrey Elfwick being elected Mayor of London. It's through the looking glass insane. It's a degree of absurdism that must have the Dadaists writhing with jealousy. The UN issued an absurd statement in the wake of this, claiming that cyberviolence is as bad as physical violence for women. What a delightfully out-of-touch term cyberviolence is. It's very 90s. Would we call it I-abuse today? But let's not get distracted. Let's get into the things that are off the rails. They seem solely concerned with women, and their statistics seem off. Most studies seem to place abuse by gender within a bracket of about 20%. That is to say, if, say, 50% of women in a study reported receiving abuse and harassment, then between 30% and 70% of men in the same study would report the same. For the UN study to suggest that women are somehow 27 times more likely than men to get online abuse is such a staggeringly huge outlier that it suggests either an agenda, a statistical anomaly, or a freak result. And indeed, if you click on the study, it doesn't seem to actually bear out what's in the article. For comparison, the Demos study into harassment of celebrities showed that male celebrities far outstrip female celebrities when it comes to abuse, with the exception of feminist female journalists for reasons that should be obvious, and Piers Morgan for reasons that should be equally obvious. Pew research into online abuse showed 44% of men versus 37% of women receiving online harassment. Cyberbullying Monitor and Bullying Charity Ditch the Label shows a variety of results over the last few years, with young women hovering around a 50% experience rate of cyberbullying, mostly from other women, and young men varying from 35% to around 50%. Know the Net, another cyberbullying monitor, paints the typical recipient of online abuse as a 19-year-old male Xbox player, not exactly the stereotype we're being presented with. Yet we're caught up with the idea across the media, across government, and across business spaces now that online harassment is a gendered issue. Why would that be? Well, I think there's a lot of reasons for this. If we go back to the Demos study, the kinds of women getting the worst harassment are those with media loudhailers and an ideology that explains for them why this happens: misogyny. It's, of course, nothing to do with them being the feminist equivalent of Katie Hopkins. It's got nothing to do with the awful, sexist, nasty things they say that provoke and elicit a reaction. Nothing to do with the clickbait. Nor is it anything to do with the way they consistently feed the trolls and perpetuate the cycle. No, of course not. It's a global conspiracy of invisible space lizards. I mean patriarchy. Women seem to tend to, and are being told to, treat online threats more seriously, when perhaps 1 in 1,000 trolls might actually turn out to be a genuine psychopath who's a real danger. Men seem to not be inclined to, and not be conditioned to, take online threats seriously, and so tend to brush them off. This may be a healthier approach. Most online threats are nothing. They're throwaway accounts, they're trolls, they're seeking to elicit an emotional reaction. They're trying to get these media people to throw fits. And if this gets people to the point of giving presentations to the UN and absurdly overblowing the problem in the media, then these are wins for the trolls. Attention, drama, idiocy, the kind of things that they live for, to make these knee-jerk reactions happen. There's also an inherent sexism in taking threats and abuse towards women more seriously. If, as most studies show, there's either relative parity in abuse or that men get more online abuse, why isn't the abuse towards men being taken as seriously? Not that I'm saying it should, but it does reveal a certain base level of gendered hypocrisy. A spurious online threat is just that, spurious. Why is a threat of murder against a man that will never be acted on taken less seriously than a threat of rape against a woman that will never be acted on? Isn't death arguably worse than sexual assault? And when neither are likely to be enacted and cannot effectively be prevented without turning the internet into a panopticon security state, shouldn't we be teaching people to deal with it more effectively on a personal level? Block, ignore, move on, rather than legitimizing their irrational fears and putting paid to a free internet. You see this same benevolent sexism towards women, and thereby against men, in terms of provision of aid in regard to other things like rape and domestic violence. There's a wealth of support for women who suffer these things, and virtually none for men, despite various studies suggesting, again, that there's relative parity there too. If society is sexist, it seems it's sexist against men by ignoring their trials and pains, and in turn sexist towards women by being paternalistic and overprotective and treating them as fragile. Like the Google thing, this is likely just another empty PR move. The UN is unlikely to be able to do much along these lines, but as with the Google thing, it's noteworthy that no moderating or opposing point of view was present. This, the UN, is an organisation which may soon be pushing for an international blasphemy law on behalf of the various Islamic states that make it up, and which has Saudi Arabia on its human rights group. This undermines its credibility, but this and Google are not battlegrounds we should ignore. Standing up for a free internet and against these kind of moral panics is not anti-woman and is not misogynistic, and don't let anyone tell you that it is. We all benefit, men and women and all points in between, from a free internet, and these kinds of moral panics are and remain a clear and present danger to that free internet. The other side of this argument, the argument for the retention of free expression, the argument for political freedom, the argument for a measured, rational approach to the genuine issue of the minority of real online harassment needs to be present. And it's not. It's not being given any air at all. And that has to change, and it's not going to change without people getting involved.